This is week 1 of a new lecture in May 2024. And this is about, the lecture that I chose was Patrick Lecture 56, which is Healthy and Unhealthy Motives in Desires. But it's prefaced by the phrase, the capacity to wish. And so for week 1, I honored the guide's structure in the lecture, and I decided to feature the guide's teachings on about capacity to wish. The first thing I'd like to chat about is why these lectures sometimes have compound topics. So in the first place, some lectures were actually meant to be question and answer sessions rather than a straight lecture. The guide promised that he would deliver a lecture once a month, and then at the fortnightly meeting afterwards, you would be allowed to ask your questions. But you didn't have to ask questions about the topic before. You could ask about any lecture that had been given, or about your personal work, or anything that came up. So that the question and answer sessions were all over the map. They were, they have a wide variety of topics in them. And often the guide would talk about something at first and then go to the questions and answers, and then find a topic within that discussion, and it would look like a lecture instead of a question and answer session. What I'm describing is there's a mix of topics and length of topics, and so the compound titles sometimes are because 2 or even 3 topics were covered in the lecture. What I have found is that it's very useful to whoever named the lectures. I'm not quite sure who did. Whoever named them was really good at naming the lectures. And so I concentrate on the actual name of the lecture. And I try to figure out why those 2 subjects were combined. I also pay attention to how the title is structured, what it actually says, rather than what it hints to for me. For instance, this lecture strikes me as being about healthy and unhealthy desires. And every time I read the title, I'm reminded it's not about healthy and unhealthy desires. It's about healthy and unhealthy motives in desires. So keeping that in mind, which we'll work on the rest of the month, why does the capacity to wish matter? And the way I see it is that the guide is first talking about what the goal is. The goal of cleaning up your desires is so they can begin to manifest. And one of the ways they manifest is in your wishing. He's not talking about, there's a lecture, Patrick Lecture 98, Wishful Daydreams. He's not talking about that kind of wish. He's talking about more of a expression of desire. And when you express a desire, you usually express it in some practical manner. I wish this, I wish that. I like to think of such wishes as they need to be cleaned up a bit. They're very often ego-oriented, or they're short-term or short-sighted. But they are the beginning of a verbalization process of deeper desires within us. At one point, I did a words escaping me. At one point, I did a study guide on Patrick Lecture 210, which is creative visualization, where he talked about how important it was to visualize what you wanted so that you could begin to have an idea, so that you could build the process of getting there. A wish is like that. It may be a less mature wish than you can do later on, but it's a process and you need to get started. So the capacity to wish needs to be there and it needs to be strengthened and it needs to be understood as something important. And since it's expressing a desire, then it's important to clean up that desire. Now, the guide is very often giving examples in the lectures. I'm sure you can read the lecture. I like to add other examples, perhaps more topical. I tend to use myself because I can keep track of it rather than using other examples or news or so forth or anecdotal evidence, because I don't really know the spiritual meaning of those. Sometimes I do. If I've worked with somebody for years, I have a sense of their story. But very often, the people we know and the news articles and the topical, the things we hear about, we don't know the full story. They're a hint. But inside myself, if I have done self-analysis, I can have a better sense of what all these things are connected to. So here's an example. 2 years ago, I was going to present AD6, which is stages of commitment. I had never talked about it. I thought it might be useful for people to hear. So that as I'm preparing to teach commitment, what I do is I find a place in me that can live out a little bit of that lecture. Not that I haven't done it before, but a fresh version of it. So I looked around at my life, not that my life is perfect, but I just didn't have any burning thing that needed committing to at the time, except there was something that I had allowed to slip, and that was weight control. And so I decided, since I could feel resistance to that, I thought that's good, then that's what I will commit to. And if I can't commit to that and get started, it's going to be difficult for me to teach others how to make commitments and follow through on them. So that was 2 years ago, and I was able to shift some things in my life successfully. Now that I'm here and I'm looking at healthy and unhealthy desires, I looked around my life again and realized that while I had lost a given amount of weight, I hadn't finished the job. I'll get to that in a second. So I thought I would address it again. Now, here's where, so my wish is to be more healthy. I'm old now, I'm 74. I'm thinking in terms of people having to take care of me in hospitals and turn me over and lift me and help me around. It would be nice for me to be lightweight rather than heavy set. That's my attempt to have a positive spin on this. So my wish to better control my weight has a very positive aspect to it. It's important to remember that we're not crazy or stupid or mean or nasty, inherently nasty, horrible people. There is a positive motive in what we wish for. It's important to find that and verbalize it as clearly as we can. Now, if that's all there is, we'll just do it. But if you've read any of the lectures, you will know we've got these conscious and unconscious things. We've got these negative and positive push-pull factors. And I always visualize this as a sailboat that's got the wind powering it forward and a sea anchor holding it back under the water. So that we can't understand why we can't progress clearly, flow quickly. And it's because we've got a negative aspect that we are attached to, that we have incorporated, that we haven't figured out, and so we can't release it. So I looked at my wish and I made lists. I'm a list maker. I looked at my wish and I dredged up the other potential negative aspects, which include vanity. They include trying to manage my body, dictate to my body. I've had therapists who have basically told me that I would throw my body under a bus to get my spiritual path done. This is not as good as it sounds, that I'm willing to sacrifice certain things that I shouldn't be sacrificing. I should be creating a team that works together. So my goal of controlling my body has a little tinge of that in it, that I want to decide to do something, and it's just going to have to live with it. And I've been working on that for years. So I have a health reason for wanting to do this. I have a mobility issue. I have knees that may need knee replacement surgery, and the less I weigh, the longer they may last. So lots of good, solid, bona fide reasons, and vanity and control issues, and even for the health issues, some fear. So while these can help propel me towards the wish, they aren't clean. They're not truly positive. So the idea is I need to go ahead and express the wish as clearly as I can. And then I need to take a look at what all the desires under it might be. And it's like you need to sort. You sort through them and you find the positives and you find the negatives. That's a step. So there's a step of making the wish and a step of figuring out what the desires are. And then there's more steps about taking those desires apart and really understanding them. Go deeper and deeper and deeper. When you finally find the source of the negativity and you face it, which is the stuff of other lectures, then there's a possibility that you may be ready to release the negativity. And you will notice that your wish and your desires flow more easily. I've run into a lot of people lately, not a lot. I have run into several people lately in the groups where the truth is they're not ready. And this is a very difficult position for someone with awareness to be in. They know, they understand, but they can't seem to move forward. And no matter how much knowing and awareness they have, no matter how much understanding they have, they're still stuck. There's a place where it's important to accept where you are. So this time around, when I was looking at my weight, I decided that I would do this as a team effort with my body, and continually ask the body if it wishes to go forwards or not, and allow it to tell me, not now. It's difficult for somebody who wants something to accept that, but perhaps you can see where this is the process of becoming clean about whatever's going on. You can't just force things into a wish that may be ego-driven or fear-driven or pride or self-will driven. So being stuck is sometimes a phase in this work. It's a painful phase, it is difficult, but it is important to face. So let me circle back to, I just wanted to give you an idea of taking it apart, going through layers. Let me circle back to why is the capacity to wish important? Because that's the starting place. And the guide has some beautiful phrases in this lecture describing the creative forces and how powerful it is and how loving it is. And it can be powerful and loving and still have some negativity attached to it. So this is where we look at such factors as dualistic thinking, where it's either right or wrong, which it's not realistic. We're not right or wrong. There are mixtures. There's a place where you look at whether you should, I've lost my train of thought. Give me a second. So there's duality, whether it's right or wrong. Perfectionism, that was the other thing I was going to mention. So unity and duality is Patrick Lecture 143. That's the central lecture on dualistic thinking. And then there's the aspect of perfectionism. Perfectionism is Patrick Lecture 97. And it is also all or nothing, right or wrong, but it's driven by a desire to be good. And that seems like such a wonderful motivation, except that if it is perfectionistic, where it's never going to stop driving you, that it will become a compulsion that will never be satisfied, because no human being is perfect. Now, this is how I tease about this. The condition of the human being is that we are here because we need to transform something. Some of us need to transform something big, and some of us are transforming something very subtle and modest, but it still needs all our focus and concentration to transform, to genuinely release the false beliefs, find the positive, inhabit it, and move forward with grace. That's what we do as human beings. We're not here to finish, stand up, and crow about it. So that perfectionism, to some extent, denies the human condition. And I say this because it can be discouraging. If you finish one level of work, your prize is you'll find another level of work. Now, when my kids were young, back in the 80s, it was when video games came out. I'd never seen a video game. And I was fascinated because I couldn't figure out what this was about. It wasn't something I could naturally understand and participate in. Like VCRs, when they first came out, I couldn't understand pausing a movie. That's just not how we watched movies in the theaters or on television. The idea of pausing one, it felt like a Twilight Zone or a science fiction thing where you paused life. Anyway, they played a video game, many video games. And eventually I began, they showed me one, and the one they showed me was something that they thought I could play, and I could. And I learned to go to whatever, the third or fourth level. Never got better than that. But even in just going through levels 1 through 4, for example, I began to understand something that I had used in my path work 30, 40, 50 years later. And that is that when you succeed at a level in a video game and you feel very victorious, the minute you press the button to go to the next level, the monsters are faster and the game is harder. That's your reward. But people who play video games want that. They're willing to re-engage and improve their skills, do better. They use all the knowledge they've gotten and they throw it forwards with enthusiasm. That's what we do with games. What I have learned to, the way I analogize this or use it, is I encourage you to consider that life is like that. So when you finish a level, you may dawdle there and enjoy it and have a cup of tea and celebrate for a bit. And then you graduate to a new level of understanding and awareness that you have earned, you have built. It builds on the previous level. And the new level will be as mysterious and new and challenging as the other levels. And the more expertise you build, sometimes the more baffling it is that you can't be better at this new level. But of course, in a game, you understand, if you do play the game, you understand and you decide to go ahead or you don't. In life, you don't get the choice of deciding if you go ahead. What I'm trying to build here is whatever you're doing right now is the work you need to do. And it should be done to the level of your satisfaction. As that settles down and you feel satisfied with it, other challenges will come into your field of vision because you'll be ready to see them, because nobody wants to sit around and do nothing for the rest of their life, and because that is the purpose of us being here in the first place. And those of us who have finished all the lessons that the earth has offered us, we wander off to new adventures in new places with new challenges. So all that is about why the capacity to wish and understanding the capacity and really inhabiting that capacity, that creative force to imagine and wish, how that relates to the rest of the lecture, which focuses on clearing up, understanding and clearing up any unhealthy motives that are existing in your desires. So that's my summary. Thanks for listening. And we're going to go back to the group now. Thanks.